So I've been thinking to myself recently, it's all well and good playing the guitar in isolation and enjoying that. And I think it's a valid thing to do, and it's great fun, and you get to enjoy all the nuances of your guitar and your amp and your pedals and everything. And that's what I've been doing for the last 2.5 years. If you've not been on my channel before, I started playing the guitar 2.5 years ago, and for 99.9% of that time, it's just been without a backing track, trying to get, some skills at all. What occurred to me recently was that I don't actually know what I like to play in a band setting, in the mix, as they say. And so is what I'm doing really that valid or useful? And on top of that, if you don't play with a backing track or with a band or whatever, your timing and all those things that make a band work together are not going to get any better at all. And I've discovered that this weekend. So what is this video? This video, I made my own backing track for the first time. I have about 2 hours in my life of playing the bass. One of those hours was trying to record it for this simple backing track. So please forgive me if you think it's not very good. It's my first attempt and something I'm going to be trying to do, if not every week. I might use the same backing track for a few videos. I'll be trying to make a couple of months. Once I get good at them, then maybe I can share them with people. But yeah, I really enjoyed picking up the bass. I've got one of these Fender Player Mexican-made P basses that really enjoy. I changed the pickups in it to Seymour Duncan sort of vintage style ones, and yeah, I think it does the job for me. But the main thing here is playing to a backing track is so different to just playing by yourself. There's actual chord changes, so that took me a minute to get used to. But anyway, what we're doing today is which guitar do I prefer in the mix? What do I think's best? So I've played a hardtail Strat and a normal trem Strat, and I've played a Telecaster, an SG, a P90 Les Paul, a Les Paul, and an ES345 that I've got. And basically going to talk you through, as each demo happens, what I felt like playing, how I felt it fitted in the mix. But here's the key for this video is this is just through a small tweed amp, no pedals. The task of today was for me to decide which guitar I prefer to play in the mix. What do I feel gives me the tone and the sustain that I want, and it's a personal thing. And then in future videos, we're going to work on like different amps, different pedals, one pedal, different guitars, or different set of pedals per guitar. My normal sort of fun, I hope, videos, sort of exploring different equipment, but with it now being in the mix, which I think is more valid, at least for me at this stage. So let's get cracking. I'm going to put the two Strats one after the other, and we're going to see if it makes much difference. To be honest, one thing that surprised me so far in recording with a backing track is the nuances. A lot of them just disappear, really. I guess that's something I've known, but I didn't realize to what extent. These guitars, when I play them separately, I can make a video about different Strats and they will sound so different. Suddenly you put a bass there, you put drums, and you concentrate on the playing and you barely think about the difference. So this has been a real eye-opener for me, and something, we'll talk a bit more about it as this series goes on. So far, what I would say is I think I've kept the amp completely the same throughout the whole video for humbuckers and everything to keep it simple. But this hardtail Strat, the Paul Waller one, probably has a little bit more oomph in the pickups at the same volume on the amp than the case one does, so that's just something to bear in mind. They're both really on the edge of breakup, probably just on the cleaner side of edge of breakup. And this is where pedals will come in, because I think more than any other guitar, that what I'm realizing is Strats need pedals to, you know, they've got a pretty scooped sound. Anyway, let's hear a bit more. Okay, so I'm going to keep my judgments about which guitar I prefer in this video till nearer the end, of course, keep the suspense going. So let's move on to a Telecaster, which I've often, between the Strat and the Tele, I've, you know, can't decide which is my favourite single coil guitar. So I go through phases with Telecasters where I'm absolutely in love with them, and then other times where I barely pick one up. And I think they're such a distinctive sounding guitar. So, you know, they're really known for certain things. I think in this case, this particular, the Danocaster with the Ron Ellis pickups has a particularly scooped sound in the neck pickup and a honky sound in the bridge. If I used my Broadcaster, which has really hot pickups, I think it could work better for this sort of music. But I wanted to try this out, and I think when we go into videos using pedals, we can really sculpt a sound out of this, because it's a beautiful guitar to play, and I just feel really comfortable with it. But now we're going to move on to some P90s. I'm interested to see how these sound between the other single coils and the humbuckers. Could it be the perfect middle ground? So what I really like with the P90 is that I get a bit more sustain from this Les Paul body shape from the P90s themselves, and they're not as distinctive or scooped as either of the other two single coils. So I find for this style of playing, it's maybe better for me. With the Strat and the Tele, I sort of get lost in my mind in, okay, I'm playing a Strat, I'm playing a Tele, and maybe that's not the tone I have in my head for this really sort of, I guess, B.B. King type of blues lead playing. This is, as I said, less distinctive, and so it lets me forget about what I'm playing a bit more. And I love the difference between the neck pickup and the bridge pickup. It's really, gives you a massive variety of tones that you can come out with, and I'm excited to see what happens with different amps and different pedals with this guitar. Okay, now we're going to move on to humbuckers, and I think this is where I might have surprised myself with this, because, well, we'll talk about that more in a minute. Let's go for this Gold SG. I love this guitar, but is it right for this sort of playing? Well, that was definitely interesting for me. It wasn't quite what I expected, when I'd been just doing a few practice runs for this backing track, I used the ES345 that will come later, which has a meatier, bigger tone and a bit more sustain. And so when I played this, it actually, in my mind, it felt more like a single coil guitar, just with a bit extra. People say that a Les Paul is a Telecaster on steroids, and I think it's the SG that's really more like the Telecaster. And that's what this felt like, except I think it sits in the mix a bit better. It's a bit more dynamic, and it's less scooped. And I'm finding with this sort of thing that the scooping is not exactly what I want, which is something we're going to play around with pedals. If we can get rid of the scoop with those single coils, or some of it, I think it will start to fit in better for what I want to do anyway. So I really enjoyed this. It's comfortable to play, you can get high up easily, but the SG, it does have that element of rocky sound as opposed to bluesy sound, a bit more. I think it depends, what exactly you're doing with it. If you go for something hotter, maybe it will work better, and that will come in future videos. But now it's time to talk about what's been my favourite so far. I'd say so far it's between the P90 and the SG. I was surprised at how the Telecaster sound as I played. I just thought, this doesn't really fit in the way I want it to. It doesn't sound right. It's too Telecaster-ish, if that makes sense. And then the Strats, I'm used to playing more with pedals and a little bit more overdrive with Strats. And playing them by themselves is glorious because you get that big low end. And so a Stratty tone by itself I love. I think it's clear to me why actually in blues, when people use a Strat, they play them pretty hot, don't they? Like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you know, he cranked those big amps and those dumbles. You know, Eric Gales, he plays a Strat, but it doesn't, I mean, it's beautiful, I love it, but it's not the Strattiest tone. Who else? Ainsley Lister, his signature amp is really mid-heavy, and he loves those early 70s, late 60s Strats, which are a bit less scooped anyway. So I think that scooping is not great for this more overdriven bluesy sound. But anyway, so in order so far, P90 and SG sort of together, I enjoyed them both, the bit of sustain you get, and yet they've still got that dynamic sound, and then the Strats, and then the Telecaster. But I think the Les Paul and the 345 might be the ones to choose between for me. So let's hear the Les Paul and see what it sounds like. So I think with the Les Paul and the 345, immediately that I started playing with the backing track, I thought, maybe this is where I feel most comfortable. To me, that bit of sustain, not too much sustain, just that bit of sustain and the sweetness of those guitars, you know, they just give me that bit more of that dynamic feel that I'm after. Even when turned down a bit lower, I feel that the sound really melds well with, you know, the bass and the drums in that trio situation. I think when it comes to using pedals, I'll be really excited to see how I can make a Strat, because obviously Strats do have a really dynamic sound. They have less sustain, but that could come from a pedal. So I'd be interested to compare it at that point. But for now, I can see why a lot of blues guys that I've seen, especially with simple rigs, will choose a Les Paul or a 335, 345, 55, whichever. They have meatiness, sustain, sweetness, etc. Now the question for me is, which do I prefer between the Les Paul and the 345? So let's hear the 345 next. firstly, I find the 345 probably a little bit easier to play higher up. And it's funny, if you watch my videos over the last couple of years and playing by myself without a backing track, I rarely go above the 12th fret. And I've said before, oh, it doesn't bother me not being able to play up high. It's only once I start playing in the mix that you realise you need all of that register to really complete the sound. Contrasting with the bass and everything, and working your way up the fretboard makes it more exciting, I assume, for the listener as well as for the player. And the 345 just has that bit more access. And there's an airiness to the sound, which gives it a bit more complexity, I felt. Ultimately, if you handed me either of these guitars, I'd be very happy compared to all the other ones. I'd say by quite a distance, I prefer these two guitars. The sustain gives you more options, and, good humbuckers in good guitars are really dynamic. We haven't got to the point of setting the amp differently for each guitar, but when we do that, we'll set the amps perhaps a bit hotter, and you'd be able to use the volume knobs more on the guitars. So, yeah, ultimately, I'd say the 345 and the Les Paul, then a bit of a gap, the SG and the P90s, and then the Strat, and then much lower down for this playing the Telecaster. And I think it's clear that the mid frequencies are sort of increasing as you get up towards the top there, and then the 345 has that extra access and that bit of air in the sound, from that semi-hollow thing, and I just really enjoy playing it. So there we go. It's a bit of a revelation for me, the fact of playing with a backing track, or in a band, I guess. Things cut through differently when there's a bass and a drum, and I think that's the whole thing I need to explore now, for the next several months. Every video should at least have some backing track in it, so that I can think about how a pedal or a guitar or an amp is doing that. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and it might have helped you out as well. If you're used to playing without a backing track, I'd suggest you go and find some. There's great ones all over the place, loads of YouTube channels that just do backing tracks as well. You don't have to pay for them. As I said, if I get better at making backing tracks and making them more interesting or complicated or whatever, I will, possibly release some for you guys to use. If you like this one, or tell me down in the comments what I could do better with this backing track. But yeah, I'm really excited about this, and it helps to put everything in context. And it does really feel like I've worked this backwards to some extent, going from playing without a backing track to playing with one, because what really matters until you're making music with it? I don't know. We'll explore that further. But anyway, I'll see you on the next one, and we'll just play out with this Les Paul and the 345 again, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.
Mm-hmm.